Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another YouTube video, Sisterly Conversation.
And our topic for this video is what are issues to look for when you are looking for an apartment? So,
So, um, I think the first issue that you should look out for is, I am guessing, like crime, any theft, any if it's like a bad area. I find many people choose where they live based on what the crime levels are. I remembered when I had told a friend of mine where he was living, and she was like, "Oh my God, that's a bad area," but it was a bad area back in the day. It's not so bad now, you know. So I think that's one thing that people really scope out when looking for an apartment. Another issue is in terms of how water settles into the apartment, especially during winter months, because Canada does be winter, does be cold for a majority of the year, and when you have wet conditions, mold starts to spread and stuff. So you have to know if the apartment is a good ventilated apartment, um, and also you also have to have an understanding of how to get rid of mold. Mold is a big factor with some apartments here in Canada due to the coldness. And then a lot of people don't like buy humidifiers or dehumidifiers. I just can't remember which one for which. Is it dehumidifier for the winter?
I think so. I can remember.
Something. So one of them deflayers.
Mhm.
Right. You gotta have in the home in order to keep the mold away, to take away from the wetness or whatever. Um, what else is up for?
Okay, so I feel like Tony went down on a speedo chase just now, just rattling off different things to look for. But for me personally, I think I will just say first of all, when you're coming to Canada as an immigrant, if you are not already, born here or have been living here for a long time, the reality of the situation is that a lot of students, unless you have somebody who you can stay at that already have their location and everything, their home and everything, a lot of the times students come here, they have to look for places, and you might not be, as Tony was talking about location, you might not be necessarily fortunate enough to be in a rich area, which I don't, for me, the rich area, I can't see anybody really looking for an apartment, maybe a condo, but I can't really see anybody really looking for an apartment in a rich area as a newcomer. Maybe if you have like all this money, but most people that are students are now coming as workers, they're now trying to get their life situated, and so they tend to go wherever they can go. I remember when I first came, I heard Tony say where we live about, well, I don't know what she's talking about now.
I
Cause,
said used to be.
oh, used to,
Used to
okay.
be.
Well, I remember when I first moved to Canada, I used to live in Jane and Finch area, so I guess that's what Tony's talking about. And the area Jane and Finch was known as a pretty bad area back in the day. But by the time I moved there, it was not that bad, at least for me. I don't know if it's just that, at the time it wasn't bad for us or what it was. But when I was living there, I did not experience any crime at all. So I think that, I was fortunate in that way, and God was definitely watching out for me in that way as well. But yeah, I didn't really experience any crime or anything. But yeah, it is okay to make sure you're not living in a crime area. But as I said, most newcomers, when they come, they don't really have that flexibility. They kind of have to go with the flow. So for looking for an apartment, I would just say that, and then that's the next thing. It's kind of hard to say when you're looking for an apartment what exactly you should look out for, because I gonna be honest, these landlords are very smart, very, very, very smart. And the reason I say that is because they tend to paint, they tend to fix up a little bit here and there, they tend to do this, they tend to do that. And when you look at the apartment, it's like, whoa, this is a nice apartment. It's beautiful. It's this, it's that. And then as you start to slowly settle into this apartment lifestyle, now you start noticing all of these issues. So it's kind of hard to say what to look out for, only because you can't really pick up on things
Right away.
immediately when looking for an apartment. It kind of happens when you're already there, and then it's kind of hard to leave because since COVID, especially, the rent have skyrocketed in Ontario, in Toronto, where we live. So a lot of people experienced a lot of what's it called, inflation. A lot of people experience a lot of inflation. People trying to jack out the eye, pretty much, with the pricing, especially the new buildings. That people
Right.
tend to say, "Oh, I living in a new building, I have this," but that's the con for new buildings, because the cons for new building is that you don't have what's the word now?
Limit?
Not limit, like trying to remember the word, price ceiling type thing. Like you don't have a cap then, pretty much. That, like, they can bring up the rent. Today it can be $1,000. Tomorrow it could be 1,500. When I say tomorrow, I don't mean literally tomorrow, but I mean like the next year, when because rent raises each year. So today it could be 1,000. And the next year it could be 1,500. The next year it could be 2,000. And you wanna like how the rent raising so fast and so high, and you got some crooked landlords that even before it's time to raise the rent, they're gonna raise it, and they're gonna raise it extremely high for these new buildings. The older buildings tend to have this thing where they have a rent cap, a rent ceiling, whatever the word is, where they can't start like have these exorbitant prices. They have to kind of keep it
Level.
level. Even though they're raising it, it can't be over the top where people can't afford it, and that's one of the pros for living in an older apartment building. So I think that's one of the things to look out for when you're renting an apartment building. Is it an older apartment building or a newer apartment building? Because the newer ones, they can raise up the price to whatever they want to raise it up to. And if you can't afford it, then you're going to have to look for somewhere else. In older apartments now, if you get it at, let me say you get your apartment at 1,500 or 2,000, well, by the time next year comes, it will raise, but it will not raise over the top. It will be manageable, right? But then with the older apartment buildings, you kind of have this thing whereby you have to look for, as Tony said, mold, because a lot of the buildings are not well insulated. So now you have a lot of moisture. You have a lot of mixture with heat. You have a lot of mixture with all this stuff, and then more comes in,
Right.
and then you have to be fighting. And from experience, um, sometimes these landlords also tend to try to put it on you.
All
Oh,
because
is your
yeah.
fault now that
Mhm.
you're not opening up the windows enough. You're not getting this. You're not doing this. I mean, who really wants to open up the windows during the dead of winter when it's
Exactly.
freezing?
And Canada, we took speaking about Canada because America might not be as cold as here, but here is
Mm,
really cold,
it's freezing.
especially in the winter time. How
Yeah,
could we keep a window open when it's -2, -3? Last year we were having temperatures
minus
of minus
15.
15 and
Yeah,
20, 22, all kind of thing. And you can't be doing that because you're going to make yourself sick because you're more looking out for the house than for
your
your
health.
health.
Yeah,
And the thing is, it is not a win-win because mold could affect the lungs and the coldness could affect the lungs.
right.
So the question now is, what is the middle ground between the mold and the coldness?
Right.
So it is
and
neither here
and
nor
then
there.
the thing is about the winter too is that when it's winter, you open up your window, the window will stick
That's
because of
another thing too.
the ice.
Correct.
And then what happens is that you can't, like, you gotta use hot water, like boiling water or whatever, to try to move the window, because other than that, the window will not move, and then you're just like Tony said, you're gonna make yourself sick because now your window is open and all the freezing
Cold coming
coolness
in.
is coming in. So that's something. So when you're dealing with an older apartment, this is one of the issues you may have to deal with, along with the fact too that these, as I said, landlords sometimes tend to be very stubborn, and they tend to blame you for certain things, because they don't want to go into their pockets to fix it. They love to get all the money in the world, but then they don't want to use the money they're getting to repair and do what they have to do. So then you have to think about if you're gonna now be in a position to use your own money to make certain repairs that you have to use, or if you're gonna be ignorant like me and say, well, it's gonna come out my rent, you know. But other than that, like, if you don't want issues, some people are very
Natural.
unconfrontational or non-confrontational, and then they just tend to fix it, which they're not supposed to, because you're paying rent, the landlord is supposed to. But yeah, that's definitely an issue with older buildings. There's always going to be issue because of the fact that it's an older building. But as I said again, but the rent is manageable because you have that rent cap. Another issue you have with living in apartment buildings, is that you end up having, because you are living in apartment buildings where other people are living in apartment buildings as well. Not buildings, I mean apartments on the same floor, above you, below you, whatever. You end up having creepy crawlers, you end up having cockroaches, you end up having all these things because people, they're coming in from outside, they're coming in from other people's apartments, they're coming, and then you have that issue. It's not that you're living in a house where, you know,
You can
everything
mop
is
and
blocked,
clean.
blocked,
Yeah.
blocked. I'm not mop and clean because you can mop and clean in your own apartment, but I'm saying like everything is blocked off. When you live in a house, you do things your way or whatever. When you live in an apartment building, you have all these other apartments next to you. You don't know how people are keeping their home in their apartments. So that's another issue that you may have. So my thing is not really what you can really prevent. It's kind of just knowing what you might have to deal with, because as I said, these are things that you might not see the first day when you're living in an apartment, or the first day you're looking at an apartment to move into. Another thing about newer apartment buildings, I find, is that they're very small. That's what I'm saying. Like, there are pros and cons for each. Newer apartment buildings might not have these issues, but they have their own issues. And I find that the newer build apartments are very small. They're very like compact. There's not a lot of
Choker.
space,
Hmm.
and you kind of like, you're from walking into the bedroom, you're technically walking into the bathroom, you're technically walking into the kitchen without any space at all. Like, you feel like you're about to bump into everywhere. So the older apartment buildings are very spacious, have a lot of space, and so you can maneuver, you could do whatever with that space that you have. So yeah, there's definitely pros and cons for both. I don't know if Tony wanna
I
come.
remember too, I visited a young lady who lived like downtown Toronto,
Mm,
and those apartments were pretty new too, and she was paying a pretty penny as well.
mm,
And the apartment was extremely small.
mm.
Yes, the stove high tech, yes, the fridge high tech, but why am I paying over $3,000 for a apartment?
That is
That is
that
not even,
small.
and that is not even mine. When I
Mm,
could pay that $3,000
for
for a
mortgage.
mortgage, so I find down here, especially Toronto area,
Mm.
they really juggle your eye, and juggle eye means like the prices are
Extremely extreme.
are extreme.
Mm,
That's what we mean by juggle the eye.
mm.
So yeah, so I find like you could only you have your pros and cons, but you have to weigh the pros and cons.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I go in with the cheaper one, because I could call it my home, and for the moment till I go other ways to get my life in order.
Well, for you, fortunately, you were able to move in with your sister,
Yes, I was
who's
able to
who
move in with my
already
sister.
who
She doesn't let
already
me
had
forget that.
who already had her apartment already, and I did because I actually live in an older building.
Right.
My rent at the time when I first moved in was very manageable, and it's still manageable to this day today. But another thing I would say is that something to look out for is also parking spot. You
Yeah.
do not want to have to park on the road. I don't know about other people, but I don't like parking on the road. Because I feel like anything could come off the road. I mean, yeah, they can come off the road and hit you in your parking spot too, but it's just more, weird for me. And some apartment buildings do not have a parking area, and I just don't think it makes sense to live in an apartment building that doesn't have parking. I don't know what Tony's thoughts are about that, but for me personally, that is a top tier. That is a must. And that was one of the first things I was looking out for too when I was choosing my place to live, because I needed to make sure that I have a car spot. So I don't know if anyone add to that.
Personally, for me, I don't have an issue parking on the road. I don't have an issue with that. I'll tell you why. Because sometimes you and your partner, or from in my case, me and my sister, she might own a car. I might need a car for whatever reason, and like there's no place to park actually by the home. It may be only like one park car spot. So what I would do personally, or in the future, I would rather park my car on a street and just walk back home or whatever. Yes, there is the chance that somebody does hit your car, but what's the probability of they not hitting your car? So I mean, I understand where my sister's coming from, but I also think that life is a risk, always. Yes, sometimes you ain't gonna get everything that you want, but you have to do what you have to do. So that's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, but then also when you park on the street, you also have to pay the parking ticket, and in some cases, you're only allowed to park on the street from a certain time to a certain time. And so, like when you do street parking, you might have a lot of rules that you have to obey. I remember I was watching a video with America too, like an American video on Facebook, and I noticed that the people had to park one side of the street at a certain time, and by the time that certain time ended, they had to move it to the opposite side of the street.
That's
And
crazy.
if anybody stayed on that side of the street past the timing, they could get told. So there are a lot of crazy rules that you have to um, abide by when you park your car on the street. And so that's why for me personally, I just would prefer having a designated spot that I could go, so that day or night, whatever time, that is my spot and I'm good to go. So that's just an important one for me. Another thing that is a good thing to look out for is also the area you live. Is it like is it like a good area in terms of um
Crime,
like
petty
not crime. I'm talking about like in terms of nature. Like, do you have a lot of trees? Do you have a lot of parks, and that you can go and walk, or you can take a walk? And you know, where we live, we have parks all over, and that was also another thing that was important to me, because I love nature, and also because it would give you fresh air, and you can go and exercise if you need. You can take a walk if you need, a nice stroll if you need, and of course, you know, just having that. There's also like sometimes we have a little bit of wildlife. We have the raccoons as well, and they're not very fun, but they don't really bother you. They bother the garbage, and that's not really our responsibility. But yeah, but having that nature type lifestyle, I think it's cool because of the fact that you have the trees and everything around you. Especially when it's falling, you get to see
the
the,
trees,
the
the leaves
leaves are
falling.
turning.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Of course, the down part of that is that they fall all on the car, because I don't have indoor or underground parking. But you, like Tony said, you kind of weigh the pros and the cons, and you kind of go with it. You're not gonna win everything. So, and then another thing that I would say you should look out for, as Tony said, is the crime rate. You want somewhere that everywhere has crime, but you want somewhere that, for the most part, is that the crime is not an issue, because you want to be safe. You want to know that when you leave, you're going to be okay. And also security measures, you want to make sure that where you're living has security measures in place, whether it's an alarm system, it's a light, you have um, the code to press in or whatever, when people are coming in and coming out, or everybody have keys to come into like, not anyone can just walk into the building or walk into the area where you live. That's very, very important, because you want to be as safe as possible, especially where some of us end up working super early, and like we have to work and leave home super early in the morning to get to work, or super late. Like, my job, I have to leave pretty early in the morning and it's still dark outside. My Tony's job, she had to leave like super late at night. And you want to make sure that you literally have good security measures so that you'll be safe.
Yeah.
So
Well, that was a mouthful, but you can let us know your thoughts about what we spoke about today. And please continue to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, bye
bye.
bye.